second parable is the rich man and Lazarus. Let's read that together. This parable is found in Luke chapter 16, starting with verse 19. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores. What's fascinating here is that, first of all, at his gate, which means it was like there's an outer court and an inner court, and the gate of the house, at his gate was laid a poor man, means that the community brought Lazarus to this rich man because they know he could help him, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. He wasn't looking for the best, he was just looking for the scraps. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. Fascinating, because dogs, their saliva was considered medicinal in those days, in the first century, but dogs were not like our dog and pets. They were considered more or less wild animals to an extent, and yet they had more compassion on Lazarus than did this rich man. The poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. Now, let's just go back quickly to that first verse. There was a rich man, okay, who was clothed in purple. That is the finest purple, the hardest to produce dye in that day, and it was worth the most. And fine linen, that's Egyptian cotton. He had the best underwear around. And who feasted sumptuously every day. Now, if you're a first century, Second Temple Jewish person, the one thing you don't do is feast sumptuously, or you may feast, but on the Sabbath you do no work for the food, you rest. What this means is this rich man forced his servants that he had in his house to cook a meal and break the Sabbath regulations just to meet his needs. So he had the greatest clothes, the best food, and total disregard for Lazarus, who was placed at his door. What's fascinating, too, is identity issues in this text. The rich man is never named. All he is known is by his wealth. His identity is tied up in the stuff that he has. Lazarus is named. This is an unusual feature of this parable. You don't find another parable with a name of a character in it. The poor man died and was carried by angels to Abraham's side. Now notice, there is no burial. The man dies, and but he ends up at Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried, so he has a funeral, but he ends up in Hades. Being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. And he called out, "Father Abraham." So Abraham was considered the father of the entire nation, the one who received the promise of both the land to have offspring, the seed that would finally rectify all situations, and that he would become a blessing to the nations, and through him all the world would be blessed. And so Abraham is considered one of the patriarchs of Judaism. And so he calls out to Father Abraham, "Have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in the water and cool my tongue, for I'm in anguish in this flame." Fascinating, isn't it? So now, even in Hades, or hell, this man is calling out to get someone to do his bidding. Notice he doesn't call out to get out of hell. He just complains that somehow he should have been treated better and or get Lazarus. He's now treating Lazarus as an object to serve him. Fascinating. When he was to be a person whom he had served. But Abraham said, "Child." Fascinating. Tekton is the Greek word here, which is a term of endearment. And Abraham, even in this man's disintegration of his soul, his whole life, being tormented and still egotistical within his own torment, Abraham does not objectify him, but calls him child. Remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things, but now he is comforted here and you are in anguish. And besides all this, between us and you a great chasm has been fixed, in order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able, and none may cross from there to us. And he said, Then I beg you, Father, to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so they may warn them, lest they also come into this place of torment. Now, what's fascinating here as well is that basically the rich man is complaining to Abraham that he was not informed well about what is right and wrong, and how he ended up here was kind of as the fact that he was ignorant. The truth is, no Jewish person living in Israel at this time could ever really claim ignorance of the law. They may have ignored it, but they should have known it, and there's just no way. But he's basically blaming God for the fact that he ends up in hell. And Abraham says they have Moses and the prophets. That should have been enough for you too, right? So the Pentateuch, the books, the Torah, and the prophets, the prophetic writings, let them hear them. And this rich man says, No, Father Abraham, if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. Now, this is kind of, this is prophetic to an extent. It is an indictment of this generation, and it is looking forward to not only the fact that there is a man named Lazarus in the Gospel of John who is raised from the dead, but the fact that Jesus, according to the Gospels, is raised from the dead, and there are many people who refuse to believe it even after it has happened, the Jewish rulers especially. And he said to them, No, Abraham, if someone goes from the dead, they will repent. He said to them, If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. What's fascinating here is Jesus is basically saying then that because if you don't believe the law and the prophets, you will not believe in any of the miracles or anything that I can do. There's a lot of context you can get for this parable, and that would be what you would do in an exegetical paper if this had been your text. A few verses before the parable, there's a discussion about mammon or money, and it says, If you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? And that which is another's means mammon or money, material possessions, and all the material things do not belong really to us, but to God. We're only stewards of them. And the meaning is, those who cheat on their income taxes will never understand the gospel. If God cannot trust us with material things, he will surely not reveal to us the treasures of the Spirit. Money doesn't just talk, it screams. It always is. It's the worst master, but a great servant if it's used properly. And money will try to make all the decisions in your life. And God expects to be hailed as the master instead. And Jesus focuses on that. So what's also interesting, by the way, Lazarus, do you know what Eleazar, which is the name El for God, and then the rest, which is God is my help. God is the one whom I rely on. And so that is kind of the theme of this. That's why this man was named, that he is the one who is helped by God in the end. Lessons to learn. Jesus is calling for compassion of the poor. Lazarus is the hero of the story. It rings true that the poor are with us and we are called to meet their physical needs. There's a false formula that wealth, in Jesus' day as well as today, often people think that wealth equates with favor from God. And suffering often means you must have done something wrong. Both are flatly rejected in this parable. The corrupting potential of possessions is really at the heart of this again. It's not critical of wealth itself, but of the social irresponsibility. This would be a good parable for the 7 deadly sins idea of the one sin of gluttony. Gluttony is not the problem that you have things, it's the fact that you focus on them and refuse to share, that there's really no gratitude. There might be self-satisfaction, but that there is that you are neglecting the needs of others. And there's always a mission, a way to serve at the doorstep. Again, what a parable for a time like this in Southwest Florida. There is a chance for you to serve all over the place, many times over. And maybe that's what we need to do.